So it's being in the world, but not of it, not captured by it. I want to take a further step with that today, but first I want to consider something else that Eugen spoke about last week, the grip that shame has on people. Eugen's description of shame's historical roots and why it continues opened deeper understanding for me and probably for many of us. After Eugen spoke about this momentum of shame, that very evening he and I watched a Korean drama called Nabilera. And it was really an eye-opener for me because it showed how pervasive this shaming and demeaning of others is, even among ordinary people, even of the same age. In the drama, one young man actually said to another, "You don't deserve to live a good life." What an example of the gaslighting that Eugen spoke of. An abusive message that causes a person to doubt themselves and to actually believe that that demeaning message is true, even if they don't want to believe it. So I've been living in Korea for over 14 years, but I've largely been insulated from that demeaning, probably because 한국말 못해요, I don't speak Korean. So for me, it was surprising to see this so prevalent.
네.
And after watching the drama, I asked some Korean friends, is it really like this? Do most people, like the people we know, encounter this demeaning? And they said yes.
친구들이?
Yeah, so how do we shake off this momentum of shame? Last week, Eugen helped you take a very important step in that. In the comment period afterwards, many people were obviously deeply moved, and some declared a message like, "I won't be deceived again." So to me, it felt like many of you made a deep and important vow to leave shame behind. And I thought, this is Liberation Day for Koreans. So I hope what we share today will help you keep that vow,
네.
even amidst the humiliation and shaming that is still present in our world.
네.
Not only in Korea, different versions are present in different countries in varying degrees.
네.
So even when you have felt profoundly liberated, and even when you have made a deep vow, you still need something that helps you keep that vow, that helps you access your true power, which comes from living in another dimension. To put it more specifically, it's really living in more dimensions than most people do. Most of you have heard there are 7 dimensions to your being, but most people live only in 2, physical and mental emotional. And all that they perceive comes to them through their 5 senses. As I hinted earlier, I think all of you have some experience beyond that. You have some experience, for example, of a 6th sense, which is generally considered intuition. But I want to suggest that you also have some experience of what is called the 7th sense. Now, if you go to the internet, you may find other versions of the 7th sense.
네.
But the 7th sense I'm speaking about opens us to the higher dimensions of our being. We begin to see the world from a higher dimension, the place of timelessness that Jae Young Nim and Eugen Nim described. Those who live in another dimension use their 7th sense. The 7th sense brings to our awareness something that is beyond this world. It allows us to perceive an already present reality. Already present, but not yet materialized. So in other words, it's present in the invisible, but it's not yet visible. An example that some of you have heard about that is from 1984 in my life. I read to a small group of people a poem by a person with a name unlike any I had ever seen. And it was a spelling that for English speakers could be difficult to pronounce. But somehow, when I read that name, I knew how to pronounce it. Eugen Pak. And when I read that name, I feel this now too, when I read that name, my body vibrated. It was as if I knew that name. And as I read the poem by Eugen, my body vibrated even more. So the seventh sense brings us something unexpected. It's awareness beyond what we perceive with our five senses.
네.
So in my example, the already present reality that had not yet materialized was my relationship with Eugen.
네.
So it is an eternal relationship that was already present in the invisible, but we hadn't even met yet. So it was important to heaven's design that our relationship eventually would materialize,
네.
come into the visible world so that it could bless many people, you included.
네, 여러분들이 그것에 포함되어 있습니다.
So another example
네.
of this seventh sense is what one young woman here last Sunday said in the comment period. Today I felt a massive inflow of light. It was not visible, but it was marking its presence. Obviously, this is the translation of what the young woman said in Korean. It was establishing an axis, saying, I am present. So the seventh sense acquaints us with something that is out of this world. Something enters our consciousness that wasn't there before. Actually, the seventh sense is present in all people. It's part of our innate abilities. Probably you, as a young child, had some sensings that were beyond this world. But very likely, shaming messages caused you to doubt those sensings.
네.
If that happened, or for other reasons, over time, the seventh sense in most people atrophies because of disuse. So it's important to realize you still have your seventh sense. You just need to activate it and develop it more. So I said earlier, you need something that helps you keep the vow to leave behind the control by shaming. Activating this seventh sense allows us to override the fears and anxieties of the world. It lifts us above the level of shame, above the level of fear, so we can bring the power of heaven into the situation. And then we are no longer subject to the controls of gaslighting. The seventh sense allows us to access power and confidence that is beyond what is usual in this world.
네.
It helps us discover a different approach. We become aware of pathways that we couldn't see with our five senses or even our sixth. Sometimes people think that following your intuition is the same as following spirit.
네.
In the initial stages, it may seem like they're the same.
네.
But as we develop our perception, we begin to realize they are not the same. It's quite common for people to attribute unusual sensings to intuition.
네.
At times you may have thought it was intuition that opened new awareness in you when it really was your seventh sense. There is a difference between the sixth and seventh sense. Recently I read something by Martin about the seventh sense.
네.
And I really appreciated how he distinguished between these.
네.
He said, "The seventh sense acquaints us with something out of this world. But all that is discerned by this sixth sense is contained in the same world which is observed by the other five." In other words, the sixth sense, our intuition, gives us awareness of this world. People have intuition about many things. Maybe they have an intuition that they can't trust someone, or an intuition things are not going to go well today. But the seventh sense gives us awareness beyond this world. And that awareness is for this world, but it is not from this world. So the two examples I mentioned earlier show awareness that came from beyond this world. Have you ever been writing or speaking and then suddenly something totally new came to you? And maybe as it came, you felt a powerful current move through your body. Likely that was your seventh sense. A couple other examples.